Bon après-midi, mesdames et messieurs. Buenas tardes, damas y caballeros. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sung-Hoon Kim, and I'd like to welcome you to the International Civil Aviation Organization's 40 Assembly SkyTalks. We've had a great 2 weeks where we have 68 presentations from aviation professionals, ranging from environment to aviation security to aviation careers to networks, UTM, drones, and so much more. I invite you to get into YouTube and check out the ICAO SkyTalks channel. Now, at the end of our presentation, I would also like to invite you to come up to the front to the mic and ask questions to our speaker. In our, this is day 3, session number 9, and today's theme is green. Our presenter today, Mr. Stelios Pesmajoglou, from the Environment Officer at the ATB, will talk more about CORSIA's Central Registry. Would you please welcome Stelios? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. This is the third presentation in this SkyTalk series that is looking into aspects related to CORSIA, the Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation. And full disclosure, this presentation is about a database. So when we came up with the idea of doing this presentation on a database, I went to my colleagues that are developing, the CCR, and I told them about it. They're all very excited. I said, yes, great, fantastic. This is an excellent opportunity. I said, okay, guys, let's make this really exciting. And they looked at me and they said, Stelios, it is exciting. It's a database, man. It is exciting. I said, well, yeah, I know, and I'm happy for you guys, but there's another 7 billion people out there that, they don't know anything about databases. So how do we make it exciting? So they looked at me. They said, well, okay, we'll think about it and we'll come back to you. That was like a few weeks ago. So while they're still thinking about it, here we are. I'm going to make this presentation. It's not going to be exciting, but it's going to be informative. So what I'm going to talk to you about, as I said in the beginning, is a database which is going to be holding information in the future about CORSIA, about the implementation of CORSIA. It's called the CCR, its acronym, the CORSIA Central Registry. And over the next 20-25 minutes, I'm going to give you information which is related to how we came about to develop this database, what it is designed to do. We'll give you information about its current status of development, implementation, some requirements, some of its features, and at the end, I will close with a few screenshots from the beta version of the CCR. So let's start with the mandates. Those of you that are familiar with the CORSIA, you all know that the CORSIA was born out of the Assembly Resolution A39.3. That was 3 years ago. A39.3 provided information about the design elements of CORSIA, but in addition, it had also additional information and requests for further work on implementation elements. And one of them was what it was referred to at the time, a consolidated central registry, to be operational by 1st of January 2021. So this is 16 months from now. And some of you may ask why we're talking about this now when it's supposed to be ready, more than a year from now. Well, I'm happy to report that we're already working on it, and so we are aiming to make this available end of this year or latest, early 2020. And that will give us 1 full year of real use to iron out any bugs in it and make any kind of fixes that we need to make sure that by 1st of January 2021 is fully operational and working as it should. So that's where the mandate came from, and the work continued. As you know, the ICAO Council developed the standards, the recommended practices for CORSIA. And in this package that was developed, one of the implementation elements was the CORSIA Central Registry. And the aim of it is to assist states to submit information to ICAO on how they are implementing CORSIA and on a number of its different aspects, and also to enable ICAO to perform calculations and at the same time to consolidate information and make it available on its website. So when it comes into submission of information to ICAO, there are 6 different groups of data that need to be reported. And they're listed on this slide. So there is a list of airplane operators which are attributed to states, the list of accreditation bodies, the list of verification bodies which are accredited in states, also information about participation in CORSIA. And for those of you, again, that are familiar with CORSIA, you will know that for the first 6 years, participation is voluntary. From 2027 onwards, there is a different way of determining how participation will happen. The 4th group is carbon dioxide emissions from international aviation, from international flights, then information on CORSIA eligible fuels, and finally information on cancelled emission units. But not all this information will come at the same time. On this slide, you will see that there is different points in time where information will come, and as you will notice, the volume of the information will increase over time. So in 2019, it was the first time that states had to report on CORSIA, and this was only for the first 2 blocks of information, airplane operators and verification bodies. Next year, for the first time, we will receive carbon dioxide emissions from the operators, from the states, having collected information from their operators. And the volume will increase gradually with information on eligible fuels and finally cancelled emission units. You will notice that the periodicity is, for the first 4 elements, it's annual. For the cancelled emission units, we receive information for the first time in 2025. And after that, we'll be receiving information every 3 years. So 2025 for the first time, 2028, and so on and so forth. Also, I would like to point out that for CORSIA eligible fuels, states have flexibility, either to report on an annual basis or to provide information once for a 3-year cycle, for the compliance cycle. And also for the CORSIA eligible fuels, provision of information for the baseline, 2019 and 20, is optional. And it doesn't count in any calculations whatsoever. Of course, for 2019, we don't have CCR. CCR will become available, as I mentioned, later this year, end of this year, or early next year. So what we did to assist states to report to us information, we provided an online spreadsheet, and I'm very happy to report that 117 states have used it so far to submit information on their airplane operators. And we have received information on 670 airplane operators that potentially could fall under the provisions of CORSIA. And this information is already on our website, and I will tell you later where you can find it if you don't know already. So I'm just going to explain to you in a very brief way how this reporting is done and how the CCR fits into this whole scheme. So basically for CORSIA, we have 3 different stakeholders. We have the airplane operators, we have the civil aviation authorities, and we also have ICAO. So the whole thing starts, and this is a very simplified way. There's a lot more detail in that, but I'm going to try to keep things simple. Everything starts with the airplane operators estimating CO2 emissions from the international flights, and also collecting information on the CORSIA eligible fuels and providing this information to the national authority. National authority aggregates this information and reports to ICAO. ICAO consolidates information from all states and provides this information to the public. In addition to providing information to the public, ICAO also estimates the sector's growth factor from 2022 onwards and provides this information back to the civil aviation authorities that they use the growth factor together with emissions from their operators to estimate offsetting requirements. And they give this information back to the airplane operators. The operators, receiving this information, they go out to the market, to the carbon market, they buy emission units, and they eventually cancel them to meet these offsetting requirements. They compile information, sent to the national authority, and again, national authority consolidates information to ICAO and from there to the general public. So this is the very simplified way of how the reporting happens and who does what. And the CCR takes into account only one part of this whole process. It's to facilitate reporting from states to ICAO and then from ICAO to the general public through the CORSIA website. There is another part, there is other registries, national registries, for example, that states may want to put in place to make sure they have the means to collect information from their aeroplane operators. And I'm not going to address that. This is a separate item, and this is up to the states to decide how they're going to do that. What I'm going to focus on is the CORSIA Central Registry, which is the specific mandate of the ICAO to take care of. So in terms of publication of information, ICAO is required, in accordance with provisions of the SARPs, to publish two groups of data. One is in relation to implementation of the scheme, and the other one is for the purpose of transparency. So in terms of implementation, there are, again, three different elements. It's the list of aeroplane operators, which are attributed to different states. It's the total CO2 emissions for 2020. And it's the annual sector's growth factor that will become available for the first time in 2022 for the previous year, for 2021. For the second one, for 2020 emissions, this is very specific. And for those of you, again, that you are familiar with the SARPs and also with A39.3, you will recognize why this information is needed. This is for states to determine how a new entrant will come into CORSIA. So this information will be published and will be used by states and by operators to determine, which point in time there will be part of CORSIA in terms of various requirements. Now, in terms of transparency, the first listing on this on the right-hand side is about list of verification bodies. Then this documentation will also include total average CO2 emissions for the baseline, the 2 years, 2019-2020. There will be also, over time, more information on an annual basis, total annual CO2 emissions, emissions also per each aeroplane operator, CORSIA eligible fuels claimed, and of course, eventually there will be offsetting requirements and emission units cancelled. What you see on the right-hand side of the screen, this will, again, over time, will grow in volume as states and operators, they're participating more and more into the process, and of course, the offsetting requirements will grow over time. Now, in the second part of this presentation, I'm going to tell you where we are in terms of development of the CCR. So in 2018, the ICAO Council agreed on the SARPs, the standards and recommended practices for CORSIA. At the same time, they also approved the general functional requirements for the CCR. And these are grouped into the following bullet points that I'm going to walk you through. First of all, the CCR has to have provisions in place to make sure the data is protected and it is secure. We all understand nowadays of the challenges that this entails, but this is one of the main requirements and one of the main priorities. The second one is about making sure that there is enough provisions in place to back up the data and make sure that in the case of a disastrous event, you can recover the information and you don't lose it. The third requirement is in relation to using the most up-to-date IT protocols and standards. And the fourth one is making sure that the CCR in its design is flexible. That means future modifications, upgrades, refinements can be done easily and as not expensively as possible. Availability. The CCR has to be available 24/7, especially during those times that states have to provide information online. The system needs to have a support infrastructure in place to make sure that any maintenance that needs to be done, it is done in a timely and efficient manner. And also to allow for system audits. And when we're talking about system audits in terms of a database, we're looking at all the different system functionalities, the technical accuracy when it comes into importing data, into a host of different things that you need to look at. So this is a comprehensive kind of approach in terms of auditing a system like a CCR. And the last part, that the CCR should be able to store and process several billion data values over time. So we took that, this is a decision coming from the council, and we as a secretariat, what we did, we developed terms of reference on how the CCR needs to be developed. The terms of reference were used for a public procurement process, and what identified as key features is that one state will have one account in the CCR, but to this account, several authorized users can have access to. There has to be a very secure interface, password protection, authentication protocols to be put in place, and also having provisions in place to protect confidential data. It has to be simple in terms of how you upload information. And to do that, you need to have some predefined forms, simple forms, and also provide the flexibility to the user to upload information in different ways, either manually or through bulk upload. And finally, traceability. Extremely important to make sure who did what when it comes into changing data, because you can easily get lost. Also, another feature of the CCR is that no data is deleted. If a state submits information and later on wants to change that information, we do not overwrite it. It's archived, the previous data set, and the new data set is being processed and then resubmitted again. So these were some of the key features, and I will show you a little bit later how these were implemented. In terms of the overall architecture, it is nothing new. There is nothing special about the CCR. This is a very typical structure that you will find in a lot of online databases. So the authorized users, they will have access to a web interface through the internet with unique usernames and passwords. They will log in. They will upload information, and then after the information is uploaded, it will be transferred into the CCR database server, and from there, ICAO will process it and make it publicly available. So very straightforward, very simple in terms of its overall architecture. In terms of the development, where we are with the CCR, we went through the procurement process, we identified the developer, and the contract was signed in mid-March this year. The beta version of the tool was delivered to us early July, and we made available for testing in July and August. We had about 25 volunteers from different states that they helped us with the testing of the CCR. And we used the feedback from all those testers to provide back information to the developer in order to enable them to produce the version 1. And we expect them to deliver it sometime in November this year, so early November, which means that we are going to deploy it sometime towards the end of the year. That's the plan. But again, as I mentioned, this may move into January depending on security checks and a number of other things you have to do. Once it is deployed, we are planning for training to be provided to all potential users of the CCR. We don't have a fixed timeline for that yet, but it will be done right after the deployment. So let me show you a few screenshots from the CCR. And again, this is the beta version. This might not be exactly how it's going to look like in its final version. I may have the opportunity to see it tomorrow. We'll see about that. But overall, when users are going to log in, they're going to be asked to provide the username, the password. Just to let you know, it will be hosted on Azure. The first version of the CCR will be on the cloud. We're going to see how this goes, and then we'll make other decisions in the future if need be. But when they log in, they're going to see a screen that's going to look something like this. So on the left-hand side, what they will see is main navigation items, where if they click on, they can provide information on specific areas. So the first one is about reporting information on airplane operators, then on verification bodies, and so on and so forth. They have, in the main part of the screen, the same kind of options, but this will become more useful over time when multiple years of data are in the system. So if they want, if the user wants to look, for a specific year for verification bodies, for example, they can type the data, and a specific, screen is going to pop up with the information they want. This screen also has other information about the user, about the role it has, but I'm not going to go into details on that. I mentioned before that because we don't have the CCR yet, we provided a simplified tool, an online spreadsheet, that states use to send us information on airplane operators. So we have collected all this information, and what we're going to do, we're going to upload it into version 1, so states do not have to report the same information again. So when they log into their accounts for the first time, they're going to see information they already submitted. So trying to make their life easier, at least in the beginning. In terms of how data is uploaded, how it is inserted into the system, there is a manual way to do it, where that's one example. If you want to insert information on CO2 emissions on a state per basis, then basically you're going to get a pop-up screen like this, where to identify first of all the state of origin, then it's the state state of origin, state of destination, and then the amount of CO2 emissions, with an indication whether this information is confidential or not. And you can do this for as many state pairs as you have. Of course, some states may have a manageable number of state pairs, others may have a much larger number. And the tool has the option to import data using a CSV file, so comma-separated values, basically. We'll provide templates for that, so states will know exactly the format of what these files have to be in, and once they know it, then they can aggregate the information, put in that format, and then automatically upload into the CCR. Once states have more than 1 year's worth of data into the CCR, they will also be able to copy from a previous year and then change all the information. So multiple choices in terms of data import into the system. I mentioned about traceability, and this is one of the coolest features of the tool, which I really like, because every single action, even if you land on a page by mistake, it's going to be recorded. If you just go into a page, just look at it, it's going to be recorded that you had looked at it. And of course, this may not seem like important, but over time it does, because the CORSIA focal point, who is the person in your state responsible for making sure data is correct, data is what is supposed to be to submit to ICAO, needs to understand how different users use the CCR. Who changed what in the information, who did what, and you can always trace it back. And if you want to reverse an action, you can do that. So these were some sample screenshots of the CCR. If some of you are interested to see more, you can reach out. You can get in touch with me while you're here, and can arrange for a little demo if you like, a live demo, and you can see more how the whole CCR works. When it comes into publication of information, we have a web page which is on the CCR, and we have already populated with 2 documents. The first document is with airplane operators from various states, and as I mentioned before, we have received 670 names, 670 operators from 117 states, and we also have a list of verification bodies that have been accredited in various states, and this is also available on the ICAO website. We also have on our website a lot more information. We have produced leaflets, we have various publications that you are welcome to visit our website and download them. At the back of the room, I believe, I have brought with me about 20 leaflets. It is 2 different ones. One is dealing specifically with the central registry, the other one with what information is going to be published through the CCR. And you can also download them if you want from our website, but if you want hard copies, they are at the back of the room and you are welcome to them. And finally, there is a short article in the latest version of the environmental report, the 2019 version of the environmental report on the CCR, also explaining some of the basics of this implementation element of CORSIA. So with that, I will stop here. I hope I made it informational for you. It was not exciting. And I said from the beginning, I promised no excitement, but information. So with that, thank you very much for your attention.
If anybody has any questions, I would like to invite you to come to the mic. Well, in that case, thank you.
Okay.